Hello, my name is Elijah Bennett. I'm 26 years old, and if you ask me about my life, I'd say it's like a long, sprawling jazz tune, full of unexpected high notes, melancholic pauses, and melodies that only I truly understand. I live in Buffalo, New York, a cold city where blizzards can swallow everything, but it's also where I grew up, where every memory lingers like snowflakes clinging to a window pane. I live alone in a small, simple apartment in the suburbs, not too far from downtown, close enough to hear the wind howling through empty streets at night. That's where I compose music, where my notes can soar freely without judgment, at least for now. I'm the middle child in a typical American middle-class family. There are 3 of us siblings. My older sister, Natalie, who's 4 years older than me. Then me, and my younger brother, Connor, 2 years my junior. My family isn't wealthy, but we've never wanted for much either. My dad, Mark Bennett, is a manager at a local car manufacturing company, always busy with numbers and schedules. He lives with my mom, Janet, in a cozy 2-story house right in the heart of Buffalo, where we all grew up. My mom is a high school math teacher, and she's always believed that life should be calculated as precisely as equations. They're practical people, always emphasizing stable plans and secure futures. My sister Natalie lives in New York City, a few hours' drive from here. She's a lawyer working for a big firm in Manhattan, constantly busy with lawsuits and expensive suits. She's successful in the way people admire: high salary, luxurious apartment, and a life everyone dreams of. My brother Connor is in Albany, working as a tech engineer for a software company. He's brilliant, always talking about code and algorithms like they're his best friends. Both my sister and brother have stable careers, the kind my parents proudly brag about to the neighbors. But I'm different. Ever since I was a kid, I've been passionately in love with music, as if it's the very air I breathe. Not the kind of casual singing, but composing. Melodies that creep into my mind in the dead of night. Lyrics that tell of sadness, joy, or stories I've never lived. I vividly remember the first time I picked up my grandfather's old guitar when I was 8. It was a summer afternoon in Buffalo with golden sunlight streaming through my grandparents' window. My grandfather, Raymond Bennett, was the one who ignited that spark in me. He used to be a saxophone player in legendary jazz bars in Manhattan when he was young, before moving to Buffalo to start a family. He wasn't a big star, just an amateur musician, but he loved music so much he could play the saxophone all night without tiring. His stories about performing in Greenwich Village, where cigarette smoke mingled with the soulful wail of the saxophone, always captivated me. "Music isn't a job, Eli," he'd say, using my nickname affectionately. "It's the soul. If you let it guide you, you'll soar farther than anyone." My grandparents live in a small house in the rural outskirts of Buffalo, not far from my parents' place. It's a peaceful spot with a big garden and old apple trees. My grandmother, Barbara, is a gentlewoman, always busy baking or tending to her garden. They're the perfect pair. When my grandfather played music, my grandmother would sit and listen with a smile. She's one of the few who supported my pursuit of music, though she didn't say much like my grandfather did. She'd often tell me, "Follow what your heart tells you, my dear grandson." They were the only light in my darkest days. As for the rest of my family, well, they see me as an impractical dreamer, a blemish on their perfect picture. Even as a kid, I felt that bias. Natalie was always praised for her high grades and academic awards. Connor got early investments in coding classes from my parents. And me? Whenever I spent hours at the old piano in the living room, my dad would shake his head and say, "Eli, you should focus on your schoolwork. Music's just a hobby, not a future." My mom was even worse. She'd compare me to Natalie and Connor. "Look at your sister, she's already a lawyer. Connor's about to graduate as an engineer, and you? Sitting there strumming that guitar forever. How will you support yourself?" Those words cut like a knife, but I didn't argue back. I just stayed silent, swallowing my tears. Let me tell you about a typical evening at our house to give you a clearer picture of that alienation. I was about 17 and it was a winter family dinner with snow falling heavily outside the window. We sat around the table eating Mom's roast and mashed potatoes. Natalie had just come home from college bragging about landing an internship at a law firm in NYC. My dad patted her shoulder, beaming with pride. "That's my girl. That's a secure future." Connor talked about a robotics project he was working on at school, and Mom smiled brightly. "My boy's so smart, he's bound to succeed." Then it was my turn. Excitedly, I shared that I'd just composed a new piece, inspired by Grandpa's jazz stories. I even sang a few lines, my voice trembling with nervousness. But the reaction? My dad frowned. "Eli, you're at it again? Music isn't a career. I don't want my son wandering around like some hippie." Mom sighed. "Sweetie, I'm worried about you. Your sister and brother have clear paths, but you keep dreaming. Please think about your future." Natalie chuckled. "I'd suggest you learn a real trade. Something safe." Connor stayed quiet, but I could see the pity in his eyes. I sat there, feeling like an outsider in my own family. My heart pounded with anger and sadness, but I just finished my meal in silence and asked to be excused. Moments like that kept repeating, and I grew more withdrawn. I felt out of place, like a discordant note in their perfect symphony. I don't resent my sister or brother, I love them truly. But that harshness made me wonder if I was even their real son. Only my grandparents understood. After dinners like that, I'd bike to their house, even in the freezing cold. Grandpa would open the door, give me a tight hug, and say, "Come on in, kid. I've got the saxophone ready." We'd sit in their cozy living room with the fireplace crackling. He'd play the saxophone, I'd strum the guitar, and our melodies would blend like a warm embrace. Grandma would bring hot tea and cookies, listening with her gentle smile. "You've got talent, Eli," Grandpa would say, his eyes sparkling. "Don't let anyone dim your light. I missed some chances in Manhattan because I was afraid of risks, but you're different. You're stronger than I was." Those words were like medicine, helping me through the loneliness. Over time, that alienation turned into determination. I started spending more time with Grandpa, learning from him. He told me about his years in Manhattan, playing in bars like the Village Vanguard, where greats like Miles Davis performed. "Music is an adventure, Eli," he said. "It can take you places you never imagined." I took notes on everything, composing my first songs, about snow falling in Buffalo, about loneliness, about dreams. Grandma sewed me a bag for my instruments and always prayed for me. They were my only support, making me feel less alone. When I was 18, everything changed. It was the summer after high school graduation when the snow melted and Buffalo turned a little greener. I sat in my room, staring at the stack of college applications my parents had prepared. Technical schools, business programs, safe places as they called them. My heart pounded at the thought of sitting in a lecture hall studying subjects I didn't care about while my mind was filled with melodies. I clearly remember that night staying up late with my guitar beside my bed. I played a sad tune about a boy caught between dreams and reality. The next morning, I made my decision. I wouldn't go to college. I would pursue music even if it meant leaving home, living on my own and facing a storm from my family. I told my parents at Sunday breakfast when the whole family was gathered around the table with toast and coffee. Natalie was visiting from New York and Connor was sitting nearby, texting on his phone. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling. "Mom, Dad, I don't want to go to college. I want to pursue music. I'll find a job and compose." Silence engulfed the room, broken only by the sound of Mom stirring her coffee. Then my dad exploded. "What? Are you crazy, Eli? I've told you a million times, music isn't a career. What are you going to live on, busking on the streets?" His face was red and he slammed his hand on the table, making the water glasses shake. Mom shook her head, her eyes welling up. "Eli, sweetheart, music is just a game. It doesn't provide a living. Look at your sister and brother. They have clear futures. You're breaking our hearts with this." Natalie chimed in, her tone condescending. Little brother, I'm telling you this for your own good. I've seen so many people chase art and fail. You should study law or engineering, it's safer. Connor stayed quiet for a moment, then said softly, Eli, I think you should reconsider. Mom and Dad are right. I sat there, feeling like my heart was being squeezed. Their criticisms cut like sharp knives slicing into me. I tried to explain, I'm truly passionate about this. Grandpa said music is the soul. I don't want to live without pursuing it. But they didn't listen. My dad stood up, pointing at my face. Your grandfather was just an amateur musician playing in bars. You want to follow in his footsteps? I won't allow it. If you drop out, get out of my house, Mom cried. Natalie shook her head, and Connor looked down at the table. I ran outside, tears streaming down my cheeks, and biked straight to my grandparents' house. Grandpa opened the door, saw my pale face, and hugged me tightly. What's wrong, kid? I told him everything, my voice choking. He listened, then smiled. Eli, you made the right choice. Music isn't an easy path, but if you stay determined, I believe you'll succeed. I support you. Grandma brought hot tea and stroked my hair. I'm praying for you. Don't be afraid, my boy. They were my only anchor, like a warm fire in a blizzard. That evening, we sat in their living room, Grandpa with his saxophone, me with my guitar. We played an old jazz tune, the soulful wail of the sax blending with the vibrating strings. That moment was strangely warm, washing away all the pain. Grandpa slipped me some old music books from Manhattan and shared his wisdom. Compose from the heart, Eli. Don't fear failure. I played in bars where no one listened, but I kept playing. I moved out the next week, renting a small apartment in the Buffalo suburbs with the little savings I had. I started looking for work. By day, I waited tables at a fast food joint, my hands and feet aching, the smell of grease clinging to my clothes. At night, I composed, scribbling melodies on scraps of paper. But the family conflict didn't stop. They called constantly, their criticisms relentless. Mom called every evening. Eli, how are you living? Are you eating properly? Why don't you come back and go to college? Music is just a game. Her voice was full of worry, but laced with disappointment. Dad was harsher. You think you're something special? Look at Natalie. She's got her law degree, Connor's got a scholarship. And you, a waiter? I'm ashamed to face the neighbors. Natalie texted, I'm sending you some money, but you should rethink this. Don't make Mom and Dad sad. Connor was quieter, but when he called, he'd compare. I just finished a big coding project. You doing okay? Why not try learning to code? Each call felt like a battle, leaving me stressed, my heart racing every time the phone rang. I tried to stay calm, but at night, lying in bed, I questioned myself. Did I make the wrong choice? Is music really just a pipe dream? The first 2 years of living on my own were hell. I faced countless struggles, late rent, eating instant noodles every day, composing songs no one heard. Once I submitted a piece to a local competition, but it was rejected in the first round. I cried alone in my dark apartment, thinking about giving up. Why did I choose this hard path? Why not be like everyone else? Go to college, graduate, get a good job, live stably, make my parents proud. That self-doubt was like a shadow, keeping me awake, my hands trembling when I held my guitar. Whenever I was on the verge of giving up, my grandparents lifted me up. Those evenings when we played piano together were sacred moments. Grandpa would text me encouragements. Don't let your family discourage you. They love you, but they're scared. You have to prove them wrong. Grandma sent food and even slipped me some money. That was the motivation I needed to keep going on this thorny path of music. Slowly, I started making small progress. I wrote a few better songs, played at local bars, and earned a bit of extra cash. But the tension with my parents remained as taut as a guitar string about to snap. 2 years of living independently passed in anxiety and drama. Each day was a struggle, exhausting work, lonely composing, and enduring family criticism. But gradually I started getting used to that rhythm of life. Then one day a major event shook my world in a way I could never have anticipated. It was a winter morning, with heavy snow blanketing Buffalo like a freezing quilt. I was wiping tables at the diner, sweat beading on my forehead despite the bitter cold when my phone buzzed. It was Grandma, her voice trembling. "Eli, come to the hospital right away, Grandpa. He had a heart attack." My heart seemed to stop. I threw off my apron and ran out without asking for leave. On the bus to the hospital, I prayed, tears streaming down my face. "Grandpa, you have to be okay. I need you." When I arrived, Grandma was sitting in the hallway, her face pale, her eyes red. My parents were beside her, their dazed expressions signaling bad news. The doctor emerged from the emergency room, shaking his head. "We did everything we could, but he didn't make it." I stood there, my feet frozen to the ground, unable to believe my ears. Grandpa, my teacher, my friend, my inspiration, was gone forever. The funeral took place a few days later in a small church in Buffalo. The air was cold, and not just because of the weather. My parents were silent throughout the ceremony, their faces stern. Natalie flew in from New York dressed in a black dress, gave me a brief hug, then sat quietly. Connor stood nearby, head bowed, saying nothing. Only Grandma and I cried. She held my hand, trembling, as if losing Grandpa meant losing a part of her soul. I hugged her, feeling her fragility, and wondered how I could go on without him. My family didn't understand. After the funeral, Mom pulled me aside, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Eli, do you see now? Your grandfather spent his life with music, but what did it get him? No fame, no money. You should rethink your path." Her words cut like a knife, but I didn't respond. I just wanted to run away to somewhere I could cry alone. In the days that followed, I was like a lost soul. I didn't go to work, didn't compose, just sat in my dark apartment watching dust gather on my guitar. Every night I dreamed of Grandpa, hearing the soulful wail of his saxophone, seeing his smile. "Keep going, Eli." But I couldn't. I felt empty, as if music had abandoned me too. One evening I went to Grandma's house, bringing Grandpa's old saxophone. She sat in her armchair, her gaze distant. "I miss him, Eli," she said, her voice frail. "But he'd want you to keep going. He believed in you." I hugged her, tears falling. Then I opened my laptop and looked at the songs I'd written. One of them, composed when Grandpa was still alive, was inspired by the jazz nights in Manhattan he'd told me about. I revised it, added lyrics, and named it "Saxophone in the Snow," a song about loss, love, and dreams that never die. I posted the song on my social media with no expectations. I just wanted to honor Grandpa, a way to keep him alive in me. But then, something miraculous happened. A few days later, I opened my phone and saw hundreds of shares. A week later, it was thousands. Comments flooded in. This touched my heart. It made me want to cry. Then millions of streams spreading everywhere. I couldn't believe my eyes. I sat in my apartment, staring at the glowing screen, my heart pounding. Was this real? A song I wrote to honor Grandpa from the heart had reached millions of people. One morning, as I was making coffee, my phone rang. It was an indie singer from New York, voice brimming with excitement. "Elijah Bennett?" I heard "Saxophone in the Snow." "I want to buy the rights to record it. Are you in?" I was stunned, nearly dropping my mug. "Really? Really?" I stammered. They offered a large sum, enough to cover my rent for a year. I agreed, still unable to believe it was real. Then more calls came. Another singer wanted me to write a custom song. A small record label offered me a contract. I sat down, my head spinning. This was the opportunity Grandpa had talked about. Music will take you places you never imagined. But I didn't tell my family. I knew they wouldn't believe me, or worse, they'd say something to hurt me. I only shared it with Grandma. I went to her house, bringing a bouquet of flowers, and told her everything. She smiled, holding my hand. "Your grandfather is so proud of you, Eli." But then I noticed she was starting to forget things, calling me by the wrong name, repeating questions she'd just asked. I was worried but didn't yet think it was a sign of Alzheimer's. At that moment, I just wanted her to be happy, and for Grandpa, wherever he was, to know I was carrying on his path. The next 6 years were a quiet journey, like a jazz tune played in the dark, heard only by me. The song, Saxophone in the Snow, opened a door I never expected. After that first contract with the indie singer from Brooklyn, offers came flooding in. I wrote for artists from all over, indie bands in Chicago, up-and-coming pop singers in Los Angeles. Each contract was a brick in the foundation of my career. I worked tirelessly, waiting tables by day to pay rent, composing at night in my small apartment under the dim glow of a yellow lamp, surrounded by a MIDI keyboard and sheets of music scribbled with notes. I learned to negotiate, sign contracts, and protect my rights, all self-taught, with no formal education or mentor to guide me. Money started trickling in, then pouring. A song I wrote for a Nashville singer made it onto the Billboard Hot 100, albeit at a low rank. Another, composed for an independent film, was nominated for Best Original Score at a small film festival. I couldn't believe my eyes when my bank balance grew from a few hundred to a few thousand, then tens of thousands of dollars. By the end of my 3rd year, I signed a major deal with a New York record label to write for a famous singer's album. The first royalty check was $500,000. I sat in my apartment, staring at the check, my heart pounding. I wanted to scream, to call someone, but then I realized, besides Grandma, no one in my family cared. I didn't brag. I kept living simply, staying in my old Buffalo apartment, driving a 10-year-old pickup truck, eating instant noodles when I was too lazy to cook. I didn't want to change, didn't want to become someone else just because of money. By the time I was 26, my net worth had surpassed $25 million thanks to royalty deals and smart investments in music funds. But I kept it a secret, not out of arrogance, but because I knew my family wouldn't believe me, or worse, would say something to hurt me. On the rare occasions I visited home, they still saw me as a failure. Dad would ask, "Still waiting tables, Eli? When are you getting a real job?" Mom would sigh, "Sweetie, I'm so worried. Look at Natalie. She just bought an apartment in Manhattan." Natalie, now a senior lawyer, would text asking if I needed to borrow money. I'd just smile and thank her politely. I poured my love into Grandma. I visited her weekly, bringing flowers, pastries, or sometimes a vintage jazz vinyl that Grandpa loved. We'd sit in her garden under the apple trees, listening to Ella Fitzgerald or Miles Davis. I told her about my new songs, my contracts, my dreams coming true. She'd smile, her eyes lighting up. "Eli, you're making me and your grandfather proud. He's listening, you know." But then, I noticed she was forgetting more. Once she called me Raymond, Grandpa's name, and asked, "Why don't you play the saxophone anymore?" I laughed, gently correcting her, but my heart ached. Another time, she told the same story 3 times in an hour, unaware she'd repeated herself. I grew worried and took her to a doctor. They diagnosed early-stage Alzheimer's. I stood outside the clinic, my hands clenched, feeling like I was losing another piece of my soul. "No, Grandma, I won't let you be alone," I promised myself. I started changing my plans. I didn't just want to write music anymore. I wanted to take care of her, to give her the best life possible. I quietly began searching for real estate, contacting architects, and planning a place where she could live comfortably and safely. But I kept it a secret, even from her. I wanted it to be a surprise, to show her that her dreamer grandson had achieved something big. Meanwhile, my career kept soaring, but I stayed in the shadows. I wrote under the pseudonym E.B. Snow, inspired by Saxophone in the Snow. My songs played on the radio, in movies and commercials, but my family didn't know. Once I heard Mom humming one of my songs on the radio in the kitchen. I wanted to say, "Mom, that's my song." But I stayed silent, afraid they'd laugh or not believe me. I didn't need their validation anymore. At least, that's what I told myself. All I wanted was to care for Grandma, the only one who always believed in me, who was slowly being robbed of her memories by Alzheimer's. I knew I had to act, to create a place where she could live safely and happily before the disease took her smile away. I began quietly planning the biggest project of my life. With over $25 million in my account from royalty deals, I decided to buy a mansion in the suburbs of Buffalo, a place with clean air and tranquility far from the city's noise. I found a 3-story house built in the 1920s with a sprawling garden, apple trees reminiscent of Grandma's house, and a small pond glimmering under the sun. The house was old, but I saw its potential. A place where Grandma could live comfortably, well cared for, and where I could stay close to protect her. I hired a top-tier team of architects from New York, instructing them to renovate the house into a cozy, safe space for an elderly person. I wanted everything to be perfect. Grandma's bedroom had to have large windows overlooking the garden, an elevator so she wouldn't need to climb stairs, a bathroom with anti-slip handrails, and a music room with a state-of-the-art sound system so she could listen to Grandpa's jazz whenever she wanted. I imagined her sitting there, smiling as she listened to Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, just like she did when Grandpa was alive. But I didn't stop at the house. A bold idea sparked in my mind, inspired by an experience from years earlier. When I was 22, I treated myself to a helicopter ride over Buffalo for my birthday. As the helicopter glided over the Niagara River past twinkling buildings and snow-covered fields, I felt a surge of inspiration. New melodies flooded my mind as if the sky had opened my soul. I wrote a song right after that flight, and it became one of my biggest hits at the time. Recently, when talking to Grandma's doctor, he mentioned that sensory-stimulating experiences like viewing scenery from above could help slow memory decline in Alzheimer's patients. The idea hit me like a bolt of lightning. I decided to buy a helicopter, a brand new Bell 407 with room for me, Grandma, and a nurse. I wanted to take her flying over Buffalo, over the fields, over the old house she shared with Grandpa, so she could smile, even if just for a moment, as memories flickered back. And deep down, I hoped the flight would inspire me as it once did to write new music carrying Grandpa's spirit. I contacted an aviation company in New York and purchased a sleek black Bell 407 for $3.4 million. I took a basic helicopter piloting course but hired a professional pilot to ensure safety. I also assembled a team of nurses, housekeepers, and security guards to care for Grandma 24/7. I chose the most dedicated people. A retired head nurse who had worked with Alzheimer's patients, a chef who could cook Grandma's favorite traditional dishes like apple pie and potato soup, and 2 security guards to ensure absolute safety. I wanted her to live like a queen, free from any worries. Every step of the preparation was done in secret. I didn't want anyone in the family to know. Not my parents, not Natalie, not Connor. I wanted it to be a surprise, to bring Grandma to the new house as a gift, to show her that her dreamer grandson had achieved something grand. The preparations took 6 months, and each day filled me with growing anticipation. I visited Grandma regularly, bringing vinyl records or telling her about new songs, but my heart grew heavy as I saw her forget more. Once she looked at me, hesitating. "Eli, or is it Raymond? Who are you?" I held her hand, smiling. "I'm Eli, Grandma, your grandson." She nodded, but her eyes were distant. I knew time was running out. I worked tirelessly, composing to keep the money flowing while overseeing the mansion's renovation. At night, I sat in my apartment, reviewing the house's blueprints, imagining the day Grandma would walk in. See the music room with Grandpa's saxophone in the corner. I wrote a new song, Sky for Grandma, inspired by the future flight with her. Its melody was gentle, like drifting clouds but full of hope. I wanted her to hear it on the helicopter as we flew over Buffalo. But deep down I was afraid. What would happen if my family found out about my plans? What would they say? Mock me again? Call me delusional? I remembered the last time I visited home, when Mom looked at me with pity. "Eli, are you still waiting tables? Why not get a stable job?" Natalie sent a long email urging me to retrain for an office job. I didn't blame them. They didn't know about my career, about E.B. Snow, about the songs playing worldwide. but their words still stung like salt in an old wound. I told myself, as long as Grandma is happy, I don't need them to understand. One evening, I drove to Grandma's house, bringing a wool scarf I'd bought from a vintage shop, like the ones she used to knit. She sat in her armchair, looking out at the garden, clutching a photo of Grandpa. "Eli, you're here," she said, her voice faint but warm. I told her about a surprise gift I was preparing without revealing details. She smiled. "You always surprise me just like your grandfather." I hugged her, feeling her fragile warmth, and vowed to myself, "Grandma, I'll give you a home, a flight, and the happiest days." Everything was nearly complete. The mansion was ready, the garden neatly trimmed, the music room fully equipped, and the helicopter parked at a nearby private airfield. I hired an assistant named Lisa to help manage details and support my work. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety, like standing before the biggest stage of my life. Only one step remained: bringing Grandma to the new house. I imagined her walking in, seeing Grandpa's saxophone, hearing Sky for Grandma playing, and smiling like she used to. But then, a call from Mom shook everything. "Eli, come home this weekend." Her voice was serious. "We need a family meeting to discuss Grandma." My heart pounded, a bad feeling creeping in. I knew this meeting wouldn't be simple. What did they want? To criticize me again? Or worse, to decide Grandma's future without my input? I gripped the steering wheel, thinking of the mansion, the helicopter, the dream I'd built for her. "No," I told myself, "this time I won't stay silent." That weekend, I drove my old pickup truck to my parents' house in downtown Buffalo. It was October, and a cold wind carried the scent of dry leaves and the crisp chill of autumn. I wore a worn denim jacket, faded jeans, and dusty sneakers, the kind of look my family always called dirt poor. I kept my appearance simple, not to hide anything, but because that's my style and I didn't need to prove anything to them. The mansion, the helicopter, and my career were secrets I reserved for Grandma, not for flaunting to people who never believed in me. I walked into the house, greeted by the smell of roast meat and mashed potatoes wafting from the kitchen, just like every family gathering before. Mom was setting the table. Dad was in his armchair reading the newspaper. Natalie had just flown in from New York, dressed in a sharp business suit, and Connor was scrolling on his phone, earbuds dangling. Grandma sat quietly in the corner of the living room on her old armchair, clutching Grandpa's framed photo. Her eyes were cloudy, staring into the distance as if lost in memories. I walked over, knelt down, and took her hand. "Grandma, it's me." She smiled weakly, whispering, "Eli. Or is it Raymond?" My heart ached, but I just stroked her hand. "It's Eli, Grandma. I'll take care of you." No one in the room noticed that moment. They were too busy with themselves, as always. Dinner began awkwardly. Mom set a plate of food in front of me, her voice tinged with worry. "Eli, you've gotten thinner. How's work? Still waiting tables?" I nodded, not wanting to argue. "It's fine, Mom." Dad snorted, folding his newspaper. "Fine? You're 26, Eli. Look at your sister and brother. Natalie just got promoted. Connor's about to lead a team at his company. And you? Still dreaming with that guitar?" Natalie chimed in, her tone sweet but laced with sarcasm. "Little brother, I know you love music, but you should get a real job. I could hook you up with a legal assistant position. Decent starting pay." Connor smirked, eyes glued to his phone. "Eli, I could teach you to code. It's way easier than strumming a guitar." I bit my lip, trying to stay calm, but my heart raced. Their words cut like knives, bringing back memories of when I was 18, when they pressured me to abandon my dreams. Mom changed the subject, her tone serious. "We need to talk about Grandma. She can't live alone anymore. Her Alzheimer's is getting worse. Last week she forgot to turn off the stove and nearly burned the house down." I looked at Grandma, sitting silently, her fingers tracing the photo frame. No one asked her opinion, no one even looked at her. They talked about her like she was a problem to solve, not a loved one. Dad nodded. Exactly. I found a nursing home in the suburbs, clean, modern, affordable. We'll split the cost. Natalie agreed instantly. I'm on board. I'm too busy to care for her. A nursing home is the best solution. Connor nodded. I think so too. I'm in Albany, it's not practical for me to travel. Sending her there makes the most sense. I clenched my fists under the table, blood rushing to my head. They spoke so casually as if it were obvious, but I heard the indifference. No one wanted the responsibility. No one considered Grandma's feelings. I tried to speak, keeping my voice steady. Grandma doesn't want to go to a nursing home. She wants to stay with family. Dad cut me off, his tone sharp. Family? Whose family? Yours, Eli? You can barely take care of yourself. How are you going to care for her? What do you live on? Waiter tips? Natalie giggled, covering her mouth as if I'd said something absurd. Eli, little brother, don't be ridiculous. Caring for her costs money, time. What do you have besides that guitar? Connor added, his tone softer but still mocking. I know you love her, but be realistic. You can't handle this. Mom sighed, her eyes tearing up. Eli, sweetheart, I know you love Grandma, but you don't understand. Caring for her is a huge burden. It's best to leave it to professionals. I sat there, feeling suffocated. Each word was a stab, digging into old wounds. They weren't just belittling me. They were dismissing Grandma, the woman who raised Dad, who held me through my loneliest days. Grandma sat there, silent, as if she didn't exist in this conversation. I looked at her, saw her trembling hands, and my heart broke. I wanted to scream, to tell them about the mansion, the helicopter, the $25 million I'd earned. But I held back. Not out of fear, but because I wanted to act, not argue pointlessly. Finally, Dad concluded, so it's settled. We'll send her to the nursing home next week. I'll handle the paperwork. Natalie nodded. I'll send money monthly. Connor added, I'll chip in too. I looked at them, feeling like I was in a play where I didn't know my role. I stood up, my voice trembling but firm. I'll take care of Grandma. The room went silent. Then Dad burst out laughing, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Don't make me laugh, Eli. If you can't contribute money, just say so. We don't need your help anyway. Natalie shook her head, smirking. Eli, don't be delusional. You can't even take care of yourself, let alone Grandma. Connor looked at me, his expression half pitying, half skeptical. I stood there, my heart pounding, deeply hurt. Their words weren't new, but today they stung more than ever. They weren't just doubting me, they were deciding Grandma's fate without her input. I looked at Grandma, saw her gazing at Grandpa's photo, as if searching for him in her fading memories. I couldn't let them do this. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone and called Lisa, my assistant. Lisa, get the helicopter ready. Bring it to the field near my parents' house, now. I spoke loudly, deliberately, so everyone could hear. They stared at me, then burst into laughter. Dad clutched his stomach. A helicopter? Have you lost it, Eli? You think you're a billionaire now? Natalie covered her mouth, giggling. Little brother, you should write movie scripts instead of songs. You'd have a better shot. Connor shook his head. Eli, stop joking. Get serious. Mom looked at me, worried. Eli, are you okay? Do you know what you're saying? I didn't answer. I just looked at Grandma and smiled. Grandma, I'm going to show you something amazing. She looked at me, her eyes hazy but with a faint spark, as if she sensed something. I stood up, grabbed my jacket. You can all laugh. But in a bit, meet me at the field. I walked out, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and anger. I knew in just a few minutes everything would change. I stood on the sports field a few blocks from my parents' house, where kids usually played basketball and soccer on weekends. The October wind cut through the air, sharp and cold, but I felt nothing except the adrenaline surging through my veins. I checked my watch. Lisa, my assistant, had confirmed the helicopter was on its way from a private airfield 20 minutes outside Buffalo. I imagined the roar of the engine, the sleek black Bell 407 landing, and the stunned faces of my family. After years of being belittled and mocked, this was the moment I would prove myself, not to boast, but to protect Grandma, to show them I wasn't the failure they thought I was. 30 minutes later, like a jazz tune reaching its climax, the sound of an engine rumbled in the distance. It started as a low hum, then grew louder like the heartbeat of the sky. I looked up and saw the helicopter appear, gleaming under the pale sunlight. It was a masterpiece, a glossy black body, powerful spinning rotors exuding strength and majesty. It landed on the field, the rotor wash kicking up dust and dry leaves, creating a small whirlwind. Nearby kids stopped playing, their mouths agape. I stood tall, hands in my pockets, trying to look calm, but my heart pounded like it might burst. My family rushed out of the house, drawn by the noise. Dad led the way, his face flushed, muttering, "What the hell is this?" Mom followed, clutching her chest, eyes wide. Natalie, still in her sharp business suit, froze mid-step, her phone slipping from her hand. Connor stood stunned, his earbuds falling to his neck, mouth open. And Grandma, supported by Mom, looked at the helicopter with a mix of surprise and confusion. I walked over, took her hand. "Grandma, I told you I'd show you something amazing." She smiled faintly, whispering, "Eli, is that you?" I nodded, my eyes stinging. I turned to my family, my voice calm but firm. "Everyone, get on the helicopter. I'm going to show you something else." Dad laughed loudly, but it was a nervous laugh. "Eli, you rented this? Where'd you get the money? Stop joking," Natalie chimed in, her voice shaky. "Little brother, renting a helicopter costs a fortune. How could you afford this? Who's behind it?" Connor muttered. "Eli, is this your helicopter?" Mom looked at me, worried. "Eli, don't do anything reckless. Give it back, you can't afford this." I didn't respond, just opened the helicopter door where the pilot and nurse were waiting. I helped Grandma aboard, fastened her seatbelt, and turned back. "Dad, Mom, get on." "Natalie, Connor, follow in the car. I'll send the address." My parents exchanged looks, their faces pale, but they eventually boarded, perhaps out of curiosity or not wanting to lose face in front of the neighbors gathering to watch. Natalie and Connor, still shocked, stood frozen. The pilot started the engine, the rotors spun fiercely, and we took off. Grandma sat beside me, gripping my hand, her eyes lighting up as she looked out the window. "Eli, are we flying?" she asked, her voice childlike. I nodded. "Yes, Grandma. I'm taking you to see Buffalo." The nurse sat behind, smiling, checking medical equipment to ensure Grandma was okay. I looked down and saw Natalie and Connor rushing to Natalie's sleek BMW. I sent Connor the address to the mansion via text. As the helicopter soared over the Niagara River, over misty fields and over downtown Buffalo twinkling with lights, I felt inspiration surge, just like that first flight years ago. I looked at Grandma, saw her smile, pointing at the river. "So beautiful, Eli. Your grandfather loved this river." I squeezed her hand, tears welling up. That moment was worth everything I'd sacrificed over the past 6 years. But my parents were different. They sat across from me, their faces tense. Dad spoke up, his tone skeptical. "Eli, where'd you get the money to rent this? Did you borrow it? I'm not bailing you out." Mom clutched Dad's hand, worried. "Sweetheart, tell the truth. What did you do to get a helicopter? Are you mixed up in something shady?" I sighed, turning to them. "Dad, Mom, I didn't rent it. This is my helicopter. I bought it." Dad laughed loudly, but his eyes were uneasy. "Bought it? Are you crazy? You're a waiter. How could you afford a helicopter?" Mom shook her head. "Eli, don't lie. I'm so worried." I didn't argue. The truth would speak for itself. The helicopter landed in the garden of the mansion, a magnificent 3-story home with a red-tiled roof, large glass windows, and apple trees surrounding it. Natalie and Connor arrived by car shortly after, parking at the gate, their eyes wide as they took in the house. I helped Grandma down, the nurse following, and led everyone inside. Staff stood at the door, bowing. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett." Dad muttered, "What is this?" Whose house is this? Natalie gasped. Eli, you rented this too? Are you making a movie or something? Connor just stood there looking around in disbelief. I led my family into the spacious living room, where a fireplace crackled, casting warm light on the cream-colored walls. In the corner, Grandpa's saxophone stood proudly on a wooden stand, next to a state-of-the-art sound system softly playing Saxophone in the Snow, like a greeting from the past. Grandma looked at the saxophone, her eyes lighting up briefly. Raymond's, she whispered. I held her hand, smiling. That's right, Grandma. This is your house and mine. My parents, Natalie and Connor, stood frozen, as if they'd stepped into another world. I turned to the housekeeper, a middle-aged woman with a professional smile. Anna, please ask the chef to prepare a lavish meal for my family and bring out tea and pastries first. Anna nodded. Yes, Mr. Elijah, I'll arrange it immediately. I invited everyone to sit on the luxurious leather sofas arranged around a large walnut table. Grandma sat beside me, still clutching Grandpa's framed photo, her gaze hazy but with a hint of peace. I signaled the nurse to stay close, ensuring Grandma's comfort. Dad sat across from me, his face still pale, hands clenched as he tried to process what was happening. Mom clutched her purse, her eyes scanning the room from the paintings on the walls to the sparkling crystal chandelier. Natalie glanced around, her expression a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Connor sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the saxophone. Anna brought out a silver tea tray, setting down steaming cups of tea and a plate of buttery cookies I knew Grandma would love. I poured tea for Grandma and turned to my family. Please, make yourselves at home. I have something to share. Dad cleared his throat, still trying to maintain authority. Eli, what's going on? Where did you get the money for this house? The helicopter? Did you take out a loan shark? Natalie cut in, her tone sharp. Eli, be honest. Whose house is this? What did you do to afford this? I'm a lawyer. I know things like this aren't simple. Connor muttered something I couldn't hear. Mom gripped Dad's hand, staring at the room in awe. I took a deep breath, feeling like I was standing before the biggest stage of my life. This was the moment to open up, not to brag, but to make them understand. Understand me, understand Grandma, understand the dream they once mocked. I'm not involved in anything shady, I began, my voice calm but firm. For the past 6 years, I've lived off music. I compose under the pseudonym E.B. Snow. You've heard Saxophone in the Snow on the radio, right? I wrote that for Grandpa. It went viral, and from there I signed deals with singers, bands, and film studios. I've written for artists in Nashville, Los Angeles, New York. Songs in commercials and movies, many of them are mine. I've earned over $25 million from royalties and investments. This house, the helicopter, the staff, I bought them all to take care of Grandma. Silence engulfed the room. Dad's mouth opened, but no words came out. Mom covered her face, tears streaming down. Natalie sank into the sofa, muttering, No way, E.B. Snow is you? Connor looked at me, his eyes wide. Eli, you really did it? That song, you wrote it? I nodded, pointing to the saxophone. It all started with Grandpa. He taught me to believe in music, to stay determined. I made it because of him and for Grandma. Dad stood up, paced a few steps, then turned back, his voice trembling. Eli, if everything you're saying is true, I'm sorry. I always thought you were a dreamer, that you'd fail. I didn't know you'd done all this. He bowed his head, something I'd never seen. Mom rushed to hug me, sobbing, Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I thought you were struggling, that you had no future. You've made me so proud. I hugged her, feeling a weight lift from my heart, though the years of being belittled couldn't be erased in a moment. Natalie, for the first time in her life, looked at me with respect instead of pity. She spoke, her voice emotional. Eli, I never thought music could do this. I always saw it as a hobby, thought you'd fail like so many others. I was wrong. You're incredible. I smiled, nodding. I don't blame you, Natalie. I just wanted to do what I love and take care of Grandma. Connor was different. He stood, walked to the saxophone, and touched it like it was a treasure. "Eli," he said, his voice choked. Honestly, I've always wanted to pursue music too. I play guitar, but I was scared. Scared of Mom and Dad's criticism, scared of being mocked like you were. I chose tech for safety, but I'm not happy." I looked at him, seeing myself 10 years ago, and walked over, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Connor, if you really want it, I'll help you. Music isn't easy, but if you're passionate, I'll be here teaching you like Grandpa taught me." Connor nodded, his eyes red, and for the first time I saw him smile genuinely. Anna returned, announcing that dinner was ready. I led everyone to the dining room, where a long table was set like a royal feast, white silk tablecloth, flickering candles, and an elaborate spread prepared by the chef. Beef Wellington, lobster salad, mashed potatoes with creamy mushroom sauce, and warm apple pie, Grandma's favorite. We sat down, and for the first time in years, the family atmosphere wasn't tense. Grandma, despite her hazy memory, smiled as she tasted the pie. "Like the ones I used to make." I held her hand, whispering, "I learned from you." The meal passed with stories. I shared more about my journey, the sleepless nights composing, the rejections, the moments I thought I'd give up. My parents listened, nodding occasionally, their eyes shining. Natalie opened up about the pressures at her law firm, admitting for the first time that she felt overwhelmed. Connor shyly shared about the songs he'd written in secret, and I promised to listen to them. For the first time, we talked like a family without judgment. After dinner, my parents, Natalie and Connor, prepared to leave. Natalie hugged me, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Eli." Connor shook my hand. "Thanks, man. I'm going to try for real." My parents hugged me longer, Mom crying, "You're our pride." They climbed into Natalie's BMW, waving as the car pulled away from the gate. I stood there watching, feeling both relieved and empty. I turned back to find Grandma had been helped to her new bedroom by the nurse. I went in and saw her sitting by the window looking at the apple orchard. "Eli," she said, her voice frail, "you remind me of your grandfather." I sat beside her, playing Sky for Grandma on the sound system. She held my hand, smiling. From that day, she officially lived in the mansion, cared for by a dedicated team of nurses, chefs, and housekeepers. I moved in too, ensuring she was never alone. Each day I played music for her, told her stories about Grandpa, and took her for walks in the garden, even as her memory faded. But I knew, deep down, she still felt my love. The months that followed were the happiest of my life, though tinged with sadness. The mansion became a true home for Grandma and me, every corner filled with the imprint of love and music. In the mornings, I woke early to walk with Grandma through the apple orchard. She loved picking an apple, even though the nurse always warned her not to eat them for fear of an upset stomach. "I want to taste youth again," she'd say with a mischievous smile, and I'd shake my head, handing her a small, cleaned piece of apple. I told her stories about Grandpa, how he played saxophone in Greenwich Village, how he laughed heartily recalling the time he got kicked out of a bar for playing too passionately. She listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes asking, "Raymond did that?" I'd nod, knowing she might forget moments later. But her smile, however fleeting, was my greatest reward. In the afternoons, I often brought her to the music room, where I'd installed a state-of-the-art sound system and displayed Grandpa's saxophone like a treasure. I played old jazz records, Ella Fitzgerald, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, and she'd sit in her armchair, eyes closed, hands swaying to the rhythm. Once she unexpectedly sang along to Summertime, her voice faint but clear, as if her youthful memories came rushing back. I sat beside her, strumming my guitar, harmonizing with her, and it felt like we were back in the days when Grandpa was alive. Those moments were so precious, I wished I could stop time, keeping her in my arms forever. Occasionally, when the doctor said she was healthy enough, I took her up in the helicopter. Those flights were magic. I prepared meticulously, ensuring the nurse and pilot were ready. We flew over Buffalo, over the shimmering Niagara River, over snow-covered fields in winter. Grandma sat by the window, her eyes lighting up, pointing below. Eli, look, it's so beautiful. Once she pointed at a small house and said, "That's my house where Raymond proposed." I knew it was a real memory because she rarely recalled things so clearly. I held her hand, whispering, "I know, Grandma. Grandpa loved you so much." Those flights didn't just help her, they inspired me. High above, looking down at the vast world, I felt new melodies flood in, like when I composed after my first flight years ago. One time, after bringing her back, I sat at my desk and wrote a new song, "Above the Snow," for a famous singer in Los Angeles. With its soaring melody and lyrics about timeless memories, it quickly climbed the Billboard Hot 100. Every time I heard it on the radio, I smiled, thinking of Grandma and Grandpa. My family changed too. After that tense meeting, they started reaching out more without the sarcasm or pity. Mom called weekly asking about Grandma and me. "Eli, are you okay? How's Grandma? I want to visit." Natalie texted, no longer urging me to become a lawyer, but asking about my music. "Little brother, your new song's a hit. I listened. It's amazing." Connor visited the mansion often, bringing his old guitar. One time, he shyly played a song he'd written, and I saw his talent. "Connor, you should submit this," I said. He smiled, eyes bright. "You think I can do it?" I nodded. "Absolutely. I'll connect you with a record label." Looking at him, I saw myself at 18, full of passion but afraid. I vowed not to let him face the criticism I endured. That Christmas, I hosted a party at the mansion. I wanted the family together, not to show off, but to heal the rifts that had lingered too long. I asked the chef to prepare a grand feast: roasted turkey, pudding, and of course, apple pie for Grandma. The living room was decorated lavishly with a towering Christmas tree touching the ceiling, twinkling lights, and a warm fireplace. Grandpa's guitar sat in the corner beside his saxophone, a reminder of his legacy. My parents, Natalie and Connor, arrived early, bringing gifts and genuine smiles. Mom hugged me, whispering, "You've made me proud, Eli." Dad patted my shoulder, his voice low. "I was wrong. You're the man of the family." Natalie brought an expensive bottle of wine, laughing, "You've outdone me, little brother." Connor gave me a Charlie Parker vinyl, saying, "Eli, I want to learn from you." We ate dinner, laughed, and talked, and for the first time in years, I felt we were truly a family. Grandma sat at the head of the table wearing a dress I'd bought, smiling despite occasional moments of confusion. I shared stories about Grandpa, and everyone listened without interrupting. After dinner, we gathered around the fireplace in the living room. I picked up Grandpa's guitar, feeling the warmth of its aged wood, and played "Saxophone in the Snow." The room fell silent, filled only with the guitar's resonant strings blending with the song's sad yet hopeful melody. Dad bowed his head, Mom wiped tears, Natalie held Connor's hand, and Grandma looked at me, her eyes sparkling as if memories of Grandpa returned. When I played the final note, no one spoke, but I felt the love in the air. Later, Connor sat beside me, shyly picking up the guitar. "Eli, teach me." I smiled, showing him the first chords. Grandma watched us, smiling. "Eli, you and that boy are so much like Raymond." I hugged her, feeling as if Grandpa were there with us. That moment with the firelight, the guitar, and Grandma's smile was the most perfect picture I'd ever seen. My story ends here, but its message echoes on. Staying true to your passion even when the world turns its back is how I found light. Family bonds, though once fractured, can be mended with forgiveness and love. I looked at Grandma, saw memories flicker in her eyes, and knew I had lived the way Grandpa wanted. Music, love, and family had guided me through the blizzard to a warm place called home.